hi, hello, and welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. My name is Andy, sometimes Mouse. I talk about books and book-related things, and today I am talking about the Ellen Hopkins books. This is this month's 24-hour reads. What have I done to myself? Yeah. I wouldn't call these... it's not 24-hour reads, obviously, because I'm spreading this out throughout a week, so week-long reads. Let's just call it like a week-long reads, where I'm going to give you my breakdown thoughts of each book. Whatever. These books are massive. So I did actually finish Crank last night. It took me, I think it's important to note, it is 599 pages. And it took me 1 hour and 9 minutes to read it. If you don't know about the Ellen Hopkins books, it's very important to note that it's poetry. So it's not like full pages of text, so I didn't just like break a record or some shit. No. I am going to start Glass today. I want to get 50% into Glass, if not finish it. Actually, also for Crank, I started it last night and finished it this morning. So I got 50% into it last night and then finished it this morning while I was waiting at the doctor's office. So if you don't know about Ellen Hopkins wrote the first... I don't know what order she wrote this shit in. She wrote the 3 books in the Crank trilogy, which is Crank, Glass, and Fallout. And then she wrote Burned and Smoke, Tricks, and something perfect, maybe? I have the titles all written down. Hold on. The ones that I'm going to be reading in this video specifically are Crank, Glass, Fallout, Burned, Smoke, which the library didn't have, Impulse, Perfect, Tricks, and then Identical. Some of these tie into each other and some of them don't, and I straight up don't remember which ones are which, because I read these when I was a teenager. And these are like, everybody who's mentally ill, they read these books. I devoured these. I would devour these in one sitting. I would devour these at lunchtime. I would like check out 2 of them, devour them in a day, return them, and check out the next 2. When did these come out? That's the real question. I like that it has a 2007, so I would have been 12 when these came out. I think I read them when I was 13 or 14, so I don't think I really had to wait for too many, but I do remember some of them coming out. Like I think Burned, Tricks, and Identical came out, and I knew they were coming out, and that was exciting. So I do want to talk about this. I want to go ahead and talk about Crank because I did just finish it this morning and it's like front of mind. So these books, Crank, Glass, and Fallout, are they're about Christina, who sometimes goes by Brie when she's being silly. As someone who used to go by Lola, like I told teachers to call me Lola. I went by Lola. Everybody called me Lola. I understand having a like different name for a different self without it being dissociative identity disorder, and Christina in this book makes that a point repeatedly. Now, what a lot of people don't know, and what I didn't know at the time, because I didn't read the afterword, or maybe I did, but I don't remember reading it. These books are actually about Ellen Hopkins' daughter, Crystal. Now, at the time of writing these books, Ellen Hopkins did not have a relationship with her daughter. Her daughter had been dealing with addiction for 6 years, and when she wrote this book, her daughter was in prison, and she was actively raising her daughter's child, Hunter. I think for me as a teenager, reading these books, because my brother is an addict, and we had gone through his story, I felt like it was valid for a family member to tell someone else's story because it was still their story of how addiction affects the family. Looking at it now as an adult with a much more critical eye and a better ability to dissect literature critically, this is fucked up. To me, I would be pissed. First off, the way that Ellen Hopkins literally portrays herself, the mother, is fucking weird. She's flirting with the teenage boys, and she's so hot. She's so hot, and she always says the right thing, and it's annoying. Like, weird. I think that it is strange to be telling this story from the perspective of your daughter and profiting off of it. She says it in the back of Crank. She said, and this also made me go, I don't agree. She said, I have been accused of capitalizing on her story, of profiting from her pain. I'll put the screen cap here so that you can see how this was written. But the story belongs to me, to my family, to thousands of families. When I started the book, I had no way of knowing it would publish, let alone go on to become the phenomenon it has. It has because it speaks to so many. It offers insight, understanding, comfort to those who have experienced similar pain. Addiction, of one sort or another, touches almost everyone. Crank may be inspired by a personal saga, but the emotions within this book are universal. Yes, but also it seems like not only is she telling Crystal's story when at the time she had no relationship with Crystal, which is weird. It seems like some of the other books are based on Crystal's friends' stories that Ellen would have only heard offhand. So it's not Ellen's story to be told. When it's such an intimate story, a personal story, I feel like that's inappropriate. But am I going to continue to read these? Yes, I am. But I feel like that was important. I will also say Crank was really interesting, and I rated it 4 stars before I really thought about like how fucking weird that relationship is. And you know, for the book itself, 4 stars. It's the way that the poetry is written and dynamically reading it is really cool. That's why I wanted some of the physical books, because I remembered that experience being so cool. But, so I give it its due. This is probably the first representation of queer people, especially teenagers, I think that I maybe had until I was an adult. Like, in books, in young adult books. For sure. This was the first representation of queer people. And while, yes, it is very much 2006, 2007 representation, 100%. I cannot emphasize enough how very clearly this is that. So it is offensive at times, but at that time, we didn't know that, or it wasn't like discussed. I had queer people in my life as a child, luckily. I'm very grateful for that because my mom did theater, local theater, so of course I had thespians. A lot of them were queer. But I didn't see it in media, and I especially didn't see myself represented. I am not represented in these books. It's a lesbian, and then one of her best friends is also gay. But it's still, I imagine that I didn't think too hard about it as a teenager, but that it still made an impact, especially thinking about when I probably read these books because of my own personal history, not getting into that, but my own personal history with the church and queerness and some things that happened to my own friends. So I think that this probably had more of an impact on me, like just these subtle side characters, than I really thought that it did. And it's interesting to see it now as an adult and like look back on it and be like, wow, that is so cool to see that represented. It's just a character. Like, it's just, they're just there. Like, there's some conversation about how, like, not understanding queerness and that kind of thing, but, like, it's not a huge thing, and I almost wish that that's how we treated queer side characters, where it's just like, all right, cool. And we're getting back to that, but I feel like in the early 2000s, pre-2010, we still, like, what queer representation we had, which wasn't much, but what queer representation we had was just like, yeah, this person's gay. Anyway, moving on. They're an asshole, though. Or, like, they're a great person, and they work for non-profit. Like, it was just like, oh, yeah, also, by the way, don't worry about it. Moving on. Like, it didn't have to be this whole thing about representation, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense. I feel like maybe someone's going to take offense to the way that I'm wording this, so I'm sorry in advance. Anyway, this update of this is already very long, and I have a million more books to talk about in this video, so I'm sorry, but we are going to move on to Glass. I am going to start that today, and we will see how it goes. I'm hoping to get 50% into it today, but again, we'll see. I will talk to you guys later. Bye. Hello, it's day 2. Day 2 of reading the Ellen Hopkins series. Books, all of them. I just finished Glass, actually. It took me about 2 hours to read it, so a little bit longer than the previous book. This book is also just generally, it's longer than the previous book. I have thoughts, and how do I word this? One, this book was not as good as Crank. Crank was good. Crank felt more raw. I think that's because Crank probably had some basis and some grounding in, like, Ellen Hopkins had access to her daughter's diaries at that time. Glass is after she's moved out, like after her daughter has moved out. So she doesn't really have access to this information. She just kind of knows this information secondhand from my understanding. I don't know when she got in contact with her daughter again, when they no longer were estranged. So I feel weird about this book because it's still supposed to be based on her story. And the reason that I also feel weird about this is several times she mentions after Christina's moved out. And remember, this is fiction, but it's based heavily on reality. She makes several statements about Christina calling home, like, because this is told from Christina's point of view. Several statements about Christina calling home and not even asking about Hunter, her son. Saying things like, do I miss him at all? Does he miss me? Does he even remember me? I think she at one point said, do I even love him? Things like that. And I feel like if you weren't Christina, or Crystal in this case, if you weren't her, you don't really get to make the assumptions that that's what's going through this person's mind, and that feels really shitty to me. Also, the story it's so hard currently, because Crank was really easy to separate the information that I knew or know about Ellen Hopkins' relationship with her daughter and how the story is so heavily based on that. That was easy to separate because it was still a point when Ellen was like involved in her daughter's life. This is, you're just making statements here that have no basis, and I feel really weird about it. There's statements about her morals and statements about how her mom is making the right decisions and her mom is right and yada yada yada. Well, her mom is writing the book. That feels weird to me. There's another statement like, maybe one day I'll be worthy of his love, anyone's love, Trey's, our babies, Hunter's, Mom's. I feel like this family should have maybe gone through therapy instead of Ellen Hopkins writing a bunch of books about it. Anyway, Crank was good. I don't think Glass was necessary. I think it's got second book syndrome too. Like, she had such a success with Crank that she probably was like, yeah, let's just keep writing this train. And it's just not as good. I'm curious about how Fallout is. I think Fallout came out considerably later than Crank and Glass. I need to double check that information. I have no proof of that information, but I need to double check that. But that's where I'm currently at. I'm just kind of like, eh. Like, I think I will enjoy her other books a little bit more when we come out of this series, because her other books are based on her daughter's friends, which I hate that, but also, like, she had to focus more on writing things she doesn't even have offhand information of and not even self-inserting herself. And I think writing yourself is hard, and writing yourself through the lens of your daughter is probably harder. I'm not discrediting that, but I do think that maybe you shouldn't have. So I think that the other books will be better because it won't have her own self-insert in it, right? She does make some statements about book banning in the digital copy of Glass. Essentially, it's an essay about how book banning is stupid. So I am not surprised that these books were hard to get in libraries and hard to get in houses because of the content that's in them. However, I think that they were really important. I was talking about them with my mom last night, and she was like, you read these when? Even she had that reaction of like, you shouldn't have been reading this. And I was like, why? I had already experienced my brother's time with addiction at 11, 12. I'd already had friends die from overdoses by the time I was 14. Like, I was witness to all kinds of horrible things before the age of 16. Like, a book like this was important. Like, I probably didn't register how important it was until now, but I think that it probably assisted in making sure I didn't feel lost, because there wasn't all of the rest of the content was like dystopian, cookie cutter, or not written in such a raw way. So I still give it that credit. I still feel like it was very important for me to read it as a teenager, but now as an adult with my critical thinking hat on, I'm wary of this story because it is about her daughter, and she did not have her daughter's permission to write this story, and that feels icky. So, alright, that's my update. I'm gonna start Fallout probably today. Stay tuned. Okay, I had some downtime, so I decided to go ahead and start Fallout. I'm 50% into Fallout. I have thoughts so far. First off, I think that it is very weird, very, 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 very weird, that this book is now, it's many, many years after the last book ended, so I assume she has some relationship with her daughter at this point. This is written from the perspective of her 3 children. I think there's one more child, 1 or 2 more children. I want to know how many children Crystal has in real life. I have thoughts. The first thought being she still spouts off that she's just like super duper wonderful, greatest mommy ever, which I think is interesting. She also references her own book, Meta. This is Meta. So in this book, her self-insert character, Marie, wrote a book about her daughter, but it's not anyway. And her self-insert character, Marie, got famous from writing this book and talks about how she wrote that Hunter's dad is so-and-so in such and such terrible situation. And in this book, they talk about that and how they don't know for sure if that's what happened. Meta. It's hurting my head trying to explain this to you. Also, at one point, Summer, right? No, Autumn. It's Hunter, Autumn, and Summer. Autumn mentions, what they didn't say is how the monster chews up families. Mine isn't the only one, but it's the only one I'm qualified to talk about. It's almost like you should only talk about your own lived experiences directly and maybe not someone else's experience when you weren't speaking to them while they were in prison. I don't know, just a thought. Just a thought. Also, this book was written in 2010. There is a descriptor here, and I'm not of Summer's, like, I guess, a foster sister, maybe, question mark? Her sister is a black little girl. I don't know, it feels weird coming from Ellen Hopkins. So I'm gonna say this with a disclaimer that I have heard people be named this, Ebony. She used the term Eben. I don't even know how you say that word because I would never in 1,000 years think to describe somebody with that word. And I don't know, it feels inappropriate for Ellen Hopkins to be using this term to describe somebody. Also in 2010, I don't remember when it kind of became understood that we don't use the R word to describe others. I do not remember when that because when I was a teenager, people still used that word, that slur. And I don't know when it kind of became common knowledge that you don't use that slur. Like if somebody used that slur in a book today, slaughtered. So I don't know when the R word, I don't remember. I'm pretty sure it happened while I was in high school, but when? Unknown. So this book came out in 2010 and the R word is actively used, and I don't like that. I don't like it, but I don't know, I don't remember if that's like of its time or not because time isn't real. So that's where I'm at. The story is boring mostly. I don't find it very interesting. The 3 kids they hate their mom and they sure wish they could live with Marie, who's perfect. I don't know. I wish I had never found this information out because it is making me hate these books. Like, I feel sick thinking about my grandmother writing this shit about me. I would be pissed. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, there's your update. Hello. Okay, so I did finish Impulse. I finished Impulse. That's another one that I don't have the physical copy of. And then I am 50% into Perfect, which is the sequel of Impulse. Impulse was good. I have enjoyed it, or did enjoy it. I think that Ellen Hopkins really wants to write influential books, but also really wants to write a romance novel. And I think we should just let her write a romance novel. Because like all of her books have this underlying theme of like insta-love. And I don't know if she thinks that all teenagers just experience insta-love, and so she's just, you know, being on par with what the teen experience is, or what. As a spectrum individual, no. But I think, I don't know. It's been a time. It's been a time, all right? I expect to finish Perfect today and to start Tricks today. Yeah, like I said, I'm 50% into Perfect. I don't know. Do these stand up so far? Yes. There's some things that I don't agree with. Like, are they in the troubled teen industry, or is this actually a mental health facility? Like, what is happening? That was my question about Impulse. And then with Perfect, there's a lot of things that are happening that I both agree and disagree on, and there are topics that I think that Ellen Hopkins as a white woman is not equipped to discuss, nor do I think she discusses it appropriately, but like, there's such specific experiences to people of color that I think that the way that she writes about it is almost like a caricature of the actual experience. And I say that as a white person, but I think that's interesting. So there's my official update for the day. We will see how much more reading I get done today of these books. Yeah, I'll talk to you guys later. Hello, I finished Tricks. Also, I started editing this video, and I mentioned, oh, I lost this footage, so I'm gonna tell you about it at the end. I think I found the footage, and if I did, Editing Me will put it right here. It is about Burned and Smoke. If I found that footage, it will be right here, so bye if I did. Hello, update on reading. I finished 2 books yesterday and then I promptly didn't say anything about it. So I finished Fallout, which is the 3rd book in the Crank Glass Fallout book set. And then last night, or this morning, because I couldn't sleep, because I don't have insomnia where I don't go to sleep. I have insomnia where I wake up really early and can't get back to sleep. Anyway, like opposite insomnia. I was digging in on Facebook. Ellen Hopkins talks about her whole family by name, and you can find them all on Facebook. That's alarming to me, bitch. You shouldn't be putting everybody's business out there. That shit's crazy. I personally would have been unhappy if I was her children, so. Anywho, yeah, so finished Fallout. I rated it 2 stars. It wasn't good. It was in fact actually quite boring compared to the first 2. And again, I really was struggling with that series by the time I just was struggling because of the way that she's talking about her real life family's real life events without really any of their consent. I'd be pissed as fuck if it was me personally. I'm just saying. I did finish Burned yesterday also, which is about a Latter-day Saint person who, like, her dad is super abusive, and she goes and goes somewhere else basically because she's been too much of a rebel. I don't know how to explain it, but like falls in love, gets pregnant, and then kills her dad. He deserved it. And then Smoke is the sequel to that, and I'm currently about 60% into Smoke. I don't have that one physically. But I think today I will manage to finish Smoke and then definitely start, maybe not finish, Impulse, which I don't remember what Impulse is about, but I do distinctly remember the cover. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that goes. I liked Burned and am liking Smoke so much more than the Crank series, and I think that it's because it's not directly about Ellen Hopkins' family without their consent. Like, it doesn't feel like thievery. And I really want to watch Crystal's YouTube channel now that I've kind of been digging into that stuff and looking into it. So, do I feel like the first 3 books have held the test of time? No, there's some slang that I don't agree with, some language, some verbiage that I think wouldn't pass in today's audience. However, I also think that the topic is valid. I think it's interesting. She's one of the most banned authors in schools. I find that interesting. Not surprising either. And you know, she openly talks about queer people early on. However, I also think there's some weird underlying religion stuff happening, and I can't put a finger on it. Like, I can't tell you what about it is setting off my little religious red flags, but something is. Something I don't like, but I don't know what it is yet. Also, I think Ellen Hopkins is a narcissist, so I wouldn't be surprised if these books also were stolen from people's lives, but I don't know about it, so I'm just gonna pretend that I don't know, and I'm gonna move on with reading these. I think that I should be able to finish this whole series in the next couple of days, though. So, fingers crossed, and then you guys can get this video, and we can talk about whether or not these stand the test of time. Okay, I'm gonna go so that I can listen to Smoke. Bye. Okay, did I find it? Let me know. Because that's for future me, past me currently. The right now me, she doesn't know. I don't know. They don't know. Anyway, I finished Tricks just now, and I think I probably will finish Identical today as well. I'm about to start it. Tricks, First off, Tricks had too many characters, and I mean that like with the most respect. There was too many characters. There were five characters, 3 girls and 2 boys, and the stories were too similar at some points that I couldn't tell the difference. Also the fact that one of them has a little sister that has the same name, I think, as, maybe not, I think I'm making that up, never mind, disregard. But, yeah. So, how do I feel about it? I rated it 3 stars. Let me give that preface. I rated it 3 stars. This was probably the most interesting of the books that I've read from Ellen Hopkins. I think that if I was going to rank them so far, it would be Tricks, Impulse, Smoke, or Burned, Smoke, maybe Smoke and then Burned, Crank, Perfect, and then Glass and Fallout. Fallout is at the bottom. I enjoyed it the least. I found it the most frustrating. I also will say I finally watched Crystal's YouTube channel, and even she's never read Fallout, even though it is the one most fictional. She says it is the one most fictional of the trilogy, whereas the other ones are about 50% correct to her real life. But she hasn't read it because essentially it feels like what would happen if she never got sober, and that is a shitty feeling. And oh my god, yeah, if my mom wrote an alternate universe wherein I never fucking got my shit together, I would be devastated and pissed. I would not have a relationship with my mother. That shit is fucking crazy to me. Anyway, I also, yeah, Tricks, too many characters. Also, I think Ellen Hopkins is anti-sex work, or was at the time that Tricks came out. I also think that Ellen Hopkins has a weird relationship with religion, and she keeps referencing religion, both in like a fuck religion, it makes people do bad things, but also in a you can be religious without being a shitty person kind of way. And sometimes those people are worse. So I don't know how I feel. I am going to start Identical though. I have read so many of these books, and this is the last one, and I'm so ready to be done. And then I will like do a formal wrap up where we just like talk it all out, but I'm going to rank them. I'm going to tell you how applicable to current life I feel like any of these are, considering they're all definitely over 10 years old. And we'll get into it, but that's where I'm at right now. Gonna try and finish Identical today so I can wrap this shit up. All right. Wish me luck. Bye. Okay, whew, this was crazy. Sorry for the lighting. It is mostly due to it being rainy outside. Whew, this was a time. So, I finished Identical, and I do stand by this being my favorite of Ellen Hopkins' books. It is the most triggering and dark of Ellen Hopkins' books, so I have to give that disclaimer. And I remembered the twist in this, so that really indicates, you know, like how impactful that was for me as a teenager, because my memory sucks. And I know for a fact that I read this while specifically going through some of my traumas as a teenager, so like, I know for a fact that I was not storing memories, or that I have since definitely erased memories from those times. So, yeah. Incredible though. Fucking amazing. Especially compared to the others. So, Identical, you follow these this set of twins. And also, I am gonna spoil the twist in Identical, so let me tell you that. And also, trigger warning for self-harm. I'm gonna talk about self-harm, from a parent, and then, what else? There was something else I was gonna, oh, drug abuse, but all of these talk about that, so like, but I'm specifically gonna talk about those things, the things I mentioned a second ago. So there's twins. One of them is being by her dad since she's like 9 or 10, and her other twin is not. And there's a car accident, and so her dad is drinking, and her mom is like a politician, and there's all this stuff going on. And one of them is like perfect, pristine angel. Her big thing is that she'll binge eat, and then she also has a tendency to self-harm. The one that is being by her dad. The one that is not is a party girl. She wilds out, abuses drugs, and sleeps around, and like very promiscuous. And she does what happens in that binge cycle. Things get a little interesting because you'll notice that nobody mentions who they're talking to in this book by name, and sometimes the wording is confusing if you don't know the twist. And the twist is that in that car accident, one of the twins actually died while the other one is still alive, and the one that is alive, the one that has been experiencing this relationship with her father since she was a child, actually has dissociative identity disorder. Now, I am not an expert on this, and so I can't talk about it, like how well it was represented or anything, but I can talk about how well I think the eating disorder was represented. I genuinely believe that it was represented well, because it's never talked about as a form of like how she personally feels about her own appearance. That's never a focus. It's more about control. And then additionally, the self-harm is also based out of control and having an addictive personality. As someone who has a history with that specifically, like a personal and very intimate relationship with that, I appreciate it being shown as that instead of, a lot of the time when people think of it, they think of it as a means to an end, whereas the real intention is to feel in control of your own body, and also the effects of it overloading your brain, and it has a drug-like effect, or can, rather, depending on your pain responses. I appreciate that representation of that experience, and I think I probably appreciated it a lot when I read this book at 14 or 15, because I was still dealing with that pretty actively. I will say the descriptors of that in this book are triggering. Like, I have a migraine now because my body feels so tense from reading this book. It is so dark and graphic and brutal. I actually don't really have any complaints about this other than that I don't like Ellen Hopkins. So yeah, that's it though. I read all of them. There was 9 of them. I read all of them. I would say each one took me about 2 hours to read, despite them being so long, which means I spent about 18 to 19 hours reading all of these in the last week. I started this last Wednesday or Thursday, so a little over a week to read all of these. How do I start? Let me rank them first, and then we can talk about like if I recommend them and whatnot. So what order would I put these in personally? I would do Identical as number 1, obviously, then Impulse, then I think probably Tricks, actually. Like, as I processed Tricks a little bit more, I think Tricks would probably be in my top 3 of the ones that I read. Then Smoke, then Crank, then Burned, then Perfect, Glass, Fallout. I think that's all of them. God, I hope that's all of them. Jesus Christ. Fallout being the worst of the stack I read, like genuinely the fucking worst. Crank, I think it's ranked a little bit like above just because it's a classic. I don't know how else to explain that, but it's a fucking classic. Glass sucks. Weirdly enough, the sequel to Burned I liked more than the first book. Getting to see the perspective from her sisters, it was interesting, and it felt less like a romance because the first book is kind of romantic in a way. That is something that Ellen Hopkins includes in every single one of her books, is that love is going to save the day. I think actually the only one that doesn't include that maybe is Tricks. I think Tricks is the only one that doesn't. Now, Tricks has a sequel. I'm not including it in my reading because I didn't want to read any more Ellen Hopkins. Literally, I'm tired. I don't want to read anymore, and it wasn't in my original plan. So, like, I'm done. I'm done reading Ellen Hopkins. Do I think these stand up? Do I think that people, teenagers specifically, should be reading them now? I have mixed feelings about this because I feel like there are some things that are represented really, really well in these books. I think that, you know, queerness just being represented in sometimes problematic, but kind of just, they're just gay. That's their drug abuse, all of these things that teenagers 100% go through. Like, taking away their access to education about these topics doesn't mean that those things aren't happening to teenagers. Shock, I know, but like, if you think your teenager is not personally going through some of these things, or knows someone who's personally going through these things and is having to take those phone calls at 3 o'clock in the morning to talk them down, then you're tripping. Like, then you don't know anything about your teenager, and that's sad. So, like, let me just say that. Either your teenager is the one taking the 3 a.m. phone call, or is the one making the 3 a.m. phone call. Like, that's it. Oh, they don't get to have their phone at 3 a.m.? You think that they're not notes apping it? Come on. Let's be realistic. I however, think that there's probably been better contemporary books. The way that this is structured as poetry is a lot easier to consume, though. It makes it go by fast. You feel really accomplished. So I don't know. I think that the Crank books probably could go. I genuinely think those could just go. I don't feel like meth is still a problem. Like, I feel like that's not the one of choice anymore, you know? Maybe it is, I don't know, but I feel like I wasn't in that scene specifically, so I don't know. But I feel like, especially because Crystal wants to write her own story, reasonably so, I would personally be like, let's just take Crank off the shelves. For the others, though, I enjoyed them. I thought that they were good and had some value to add to the world, so I don't know. Yes and no, and it depends on the teenager, which I think is probably how we should view most books, is it depends on the teenager, right? So, but that's it. I have completed this. I've finished it. We can move on. This was probably the hardest focus on one set of books reading that I've done yet, because it was so many books and it was so many heavy fucking topics that I am exhausted mentally. But I had fun. This was a good time. If you read these books as a teenager, let me know what your thoughts are. Have you read them again as an adult? What do you think? What do you think about anything that I've said in these stories? What do you think about Ellen Hopkins specifically? I'm gonna have to put like a do not interact Ellen Hopkins in the caption for this. If you have books from your youth that you think that I should read, let me know, because this is fun. I enjoy doing this. I had my childhood reread series like forever ago, and I enjoy doing that a lot, but doing like the weird, very popular young adult books that I was very into as a teenager has been kind of fun. So let me know if you have any, and I'll look into it. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and share. If you didn't enjoy this video, go tell Ellen Hopkins about it. Maybe she'll write a book. Just kidding. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share. I think I said that already. I post videos every Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time every single week except for the first full week of the month. And that's it. Alright, I have to go because these literally gave me a migraine. Don't forget to take your meds, drink your water, and do something today to take care of yourselves. Okay, thanks. Bye.